you can be super passionate about like a terrible idea and spend your whole life working on it if no one maybe wants to buy it, or maybe your timing's wrong. So much of it comes down to timing, being a little bit early but not too early, um, the market, and like making. And so it's not just sitting in a room and thinking about like the world's best idea. It's also being hyper aware of what's going on in the world, how the world's changing, where things are being sold, who's buying them, what trends are going on, and then looking for angles and approaches and niches within all of that. Um, and that's the hard part.
Okay. So today I have Brandon Ball, and he has been doing a lot of different things, including entrepreneurship, and I will just be asking him a few questions to get to know him and allow him to talk about some of the things that he's been doing. So thank you for joining, Brandon. And the first question is just tell us about yourself. What is your passion?
Sure. And my name is Brandon. I've been entrepreneurial from a very young age, early on. Currently, well, it's just personally, I live in South Florida. I'm a new dad. I had my first daughter, first child last year. So personally, I'm in a whole new chapter. I had a baby in the middle of the pandemic last May, and I'm growing my family. So that's really exciting on the personal side. Um, Business wise, I've been, like I said, starting businesses really right after college. I went to the University of Florida, got a finance business degree, general degree, um, and after that, started working in a private equity cold calling sales job down here. And one of my friends um, and his father decided that he was going to move to China and start a business, and they wanted me to go with him. So when I was 22, I decided to quit my job and pack my bags. And I'd never been to Asia, but we packed two bags and we took a one-way flight and we started a business. Um, from there, fast forward to today. Um, well, it's a long. I could tell the long story, the short story, but the short story is that from that point forward, I kind of started my journey of being a little bit outside the lines and doing my own thing. And and over the course of that time, it's been about 12 years since then. And we've successfully sold two businesses, two startups, have exited, one for 7 figures and one for 8 figures. Most of my successes and passion have been around product-based businesses, um, physical products, both hardware and supplements and food, all sorts of different ideas and products. And I'm usually that partner, that person that's on the operational side creating them. So, from idea to launch to making them happen. My partners were usually more that I worked with were usually more on the sales and marketing and capital raising side, and I was always the operational guy that made it happen. So, with that and that path, I think that I found early on in my career in my 20s, um, the itch that was being scratched of like what you would now call equilibrium in your school. For me, I found that early on, and I was very lucky for that type of work I found creating these products and doing that was just enthralling to me, and it didn't feel like work anymore. And I found that early on, but that required things like quitting my job, things like taking risks, things like continuing to pursue and find that. I didn't just do it passively. It didn't just come to me. So when it comes to a passion, something I'm really good at and really into, I would say it's creating physical things and products, and then bringing them to market, and things that make impacts in people's lives and make their lives better.
Wow, yeah. One question I have based off of that is you said the how your journey kind of started was you packed your bags and you went to China, and then and then you started your first business. What and and also quitting your job, what made you willing to kind of just take the risk and jump at that opportunity? Because a lot of people may be kind of afraid to take that first step, and that might be what's holding them back.
Yeah, I think a few key parts of that was I was young.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if I jumped and fell straight on my face, I wouldn't have fallen that far because I hadn't climbed very far. I was living in my parents' house, in my childhood bedroom. I was driving to work. I was saving a little bit of money. I had no costs. Um, I had no baby. I had no mortgage. So, and Gary Vaynerchuk talks about this a lot. Take risks early and go for it. And and that was a big part of it. He wasn't around back then. There was none of this entrepreneurship culture. There was no, content and influencers and people telling you these things. It was just innate in me to know that. So that was one part of it, but also um, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy being back in South Florida. I was young. I was single. I was ready to take over the world and do stuff. And then my current job wasn't making me feel as if I was doing stuff. I had the mindset that I need to get anywhere out of here and do something else, and anywhere out of here that's a big city, go to New York, go to wherever, and do stuff. It was just like a massive amount of energy that I had that needed to get out. Um, and so, you figure if you can make it in China, then in Shanghai, then you can make it anywhere, and pick a big challenge and then just do that. So that was basically the decision. And I had the desire to go do something other than what I was doing. And I didn't know what that was, but I wanted that to get that energy out. And when I had an opportunity that presented itself, I made the decision and did it.
Yeah. Also, what do you think? You're saying you're more on the operational side of making things happen. What makes you good at that, and what is the skill set that you have that allows you to kind of just make things happen and bring these products out?
I think that's just kind of innate in the person, like your personal, you don't your personal DNA, or like who you are, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the interesting part about that is you don't get to choose it. Like it's already in you. You just have to be real and self-aware of what it is, and then go towards that. If I want to in my head be a brilliant salesman, or investor, or trader, or these things that I want to be brilliant at all of these things. I would love to be a fantastic accountant or whatever, right? Like a whiz. Um, but I didn't get, you don't get to sit and pick it. What is actually your best thing is just there. So you just have to try all those things until you vibe with, click in the right one. And when you do, but if you don't try all those things that you think you might be good at, and then fall on your face and realize, hey, I don't even really like reading financial statements and understanding markets and I don't want to do any of that. I want to make stuff. So you can't just sit back and be like, what is my passion? You have to just figure it out by doing, and being super aware of like what's giving you energy and what's not. And so that's, but that, so to me, that was doing the doing, getting stuff done. I would look around and be like, who's going to do this? There's no one around. It's just me and my partner, and he's doing some other stuff. So I guess I'm going to do it. So let's figure it out. Let's step one, step two, step three. And so that was just always me, and you just, and I think some of that stuff's around from early ages of looking around with a group of friends, and they have an idea, and it's like, well, who's going to do it? And it's like, well, none of you are going to do it. So I guess I'll do it. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to go do this, and this, right? So that stuff's around even from early ages, that you can see who's the doers and who's not.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Do you see yourself as an innovator, and if so, why?
I do see myself as an innovator. Over the course of these years, I've created probably 7 different brands and product lines. Um, one of which was an LED dog collar that I mentioned, which was our very first one. We got it into PetSmart and Petco, and we ended up selling that business. There were some e-cigarette vape brands that I was a part of as part of my career. The latest that I worked on were CBD supplement brands that didn't exist and were just ideas that then got created and brought to market. I worked on and created a food startup for my sister called Bake Bars in one of my career gaps, just like over the course of a month. I'm working on a new startup and advising my wife on a food startup she's working on now. Um, so yeah, I do think that I'm an innovator in that sense, probably on a smaller scale than other famous innovators, but I think a bigger scale than others who don't do that kind of stuff. So yeah, I do think I'm an innovator in that sense, and I'll continue to pour my energies into those types of things. I think for the rest of my career in that way.
Hmm. Yeah, and you were it's like an LED dog collar and then some like food businesses. Is there is there a specific space that you're more interested in, or is it just kind of just bringing products out, and is it just that you see a problem or you see something that could be there that you think is better but isn't, and then you want to try making that happen and bringing that out into the world, um or like what is that thought process for you? Or I think some business ideas may have like known someone who had the idea and then you wanted to make it happen.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest parts. What you're touching on is like, well, what and how, and I think that's a lot of the secret sauce of like choosing opportunity and deciding what to commit to. Um, you can be super passionate about like a terrible idea and spend your whole life working on it if no one maybe wants to buy it, or maybe your timing's wrong. So much of it comes down to timing, being a little bit early but not too early, um, the market, and like making. And so it's not just sitting in a room and thinking about like the world's best idea. It's also being hyper aware of what's going on in the world, how the world's changing, where things are being sold, who's buying them, what trends are going on, and then looking for angles and approaches and niches within all of that. Um, and that's the hard part. And then making sure that when you're kind of locked and loaded and like something, that you've really kind of beat it up and have a mindset that there's no way this doesn't work. It's definitely going to work in some type of way. I don't know how much or how big it could get, but it certainly is going to get us somewhere. And when you have that feeling, um, it's a good place to be and start from. And and then there's a million different tidbits of advice and things that happen along the way from there. But you have to really be super confident that not only is it a great idea, but that people really want it and that there's really a market there, and you know how to sell it and you know how to get it into people's hands and you know how to make money with it. Because if you don't, um, and you can't buy something low and sell it for more money and people are going to pay that value for it, then you're not going to last very long. So you have to be, think about the money and think about sales just as much as you think about the product and how great it is. You have to have that business mindset too to have any longevity or get anywhere with it.
Hmm. What would you say makes like a product viable, or how do you know when, or at least kind of your way of gauging whether or not a product is going to be something that's viable and something you can sell and that people will want?
It depends on the situation and what group of people you're with and the stage of the business and all of that. But I think it's doing the best you can with surveying your customers or friends or family, like who is the market you're going to try to sell this to, and then talking to them. Obviously, that's sort of very fundamental advice.
Mm,
Um, but but also at the same time, you might be creating something that people haven't seen before or don't know that they need or want it until it really existed. And that's where things get really challenging. And you have to rely more on your gut um, than facts or data or market surveys and check boxes and things like that. So it's a combination of those two things. Um, and certainly you can get a lot from doing that type of research and questioning and asking people stuff. But there's this other part of it that's very internal that like you just have to believe in it and know people will want it before they even know that they want it. And that's the hard part of being confident in it when you aren't sure, but you have a good feeling that everybody's going to want it.
mm. That's also one thing to know that is by being your own user in a sense where you're kind of solving a problem in your own life or providing a product in your own life and I'm going to use this so maybe other people will want to as well.
Yeah.
What are the skills you wish you learned when you were young?
I think of this in a couple ways. One, I wish if I could have done things over again, when I went to school and college, I probably would have looked to learn a hard skill rather than soft business degree. I didn't get much out of my 4 year finance degree, and I think that I just don't think it helped me that much. And I think that my time there would have been better spent picking a actual hard skill and getting that type of a degree. And whether or not you use it or not, that's not the point. Just because you learn engineering doesn't mean you need to be an engineer. Just because you learn how to program in computer science doesn't mean you need to be a software engineer. Um, but whatever you're kind of leaning towards or interested in, that's a technical or actual skill set that requires deep learning and thought and trial and error. I would seek to pick one of those things and and learn it while you're spending time in college learning. You might as well learn something like that, whether or not you use it or not, as opposed to just sort of a general business degree. I just don't think there's that much value in them. And from my own personal experience, that's that's uh that's one thing. Do you have any questions on that one?
Well, is that just because you feel as though it's kind of easier to learn maybe on your own, and then when it comes to like a hard skill, then you kind of need more like an expert opinion or more detailed instructions on how you're supposed to learn it, or is
Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like it's like that time period of life is carved out for you to be learning. So, when you can take it two ways, you can actually be like, this is a time where it's okay to be learning and not working and not making money. And I'm going to either take some loans or, you know, get a scholarship or whatever. But like, I'm going to just spend this time learning. So, and then it's like, might as well spend your time learning something that is like more tangible and like a skill set that either graphic design or computer programming or like something that you would then be able to do yourself really really well for the rest of your career that you wouldn't need to rely on or pay others to do. And think of it that way, as opposed to if you just get a general degree. I wouldn't say you're wasting your time, but I think that time is best spent like getting a skill like that, and then spending those years doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one thing is like if you were to get maybe a degree in engineering, then you might feel pressured to kind of have a job doing engineering because you spent the time learning the technical skill, but then it's also you can use that skill and apply it in a lot of different areas, and then try to take even just a conceptual understanding of just engineering, and then you maybe finding parallels from that into something else that you are interested in doing.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. And so, what is some advice you would like to give students and members at Weekly School wanting to start their own business?
Um, so this is a good one, and I know that a lot of students at Equal School are starting businesses, right? Yourself included. Um, I think that going back to Gary Vaynerchuk, his two big things were self-awareness and patience. Like he just like talks about that all the time, and it's a really just from a very high level, it's a very wise take on a lot of complex things about advice about business, but like wrapped up in two things. It's like eloquently simple in its approach. It does, if you just actually do those two things, you'll be great. You know, you'll be good. Um, to dive deeper than that, that's sort of a very simple answer that everyone probably is like, that doesn't really help me at all. Um, I think there's a couple of things I think through. Um, let me think about how to phrase this. So early on, it's really easy to get started and kind of shake hands with someone and get really excited about an idea, and then just start, you know, and like just get going and say, we'll just figure it out as we go. This is awesome. It's going to be amazing. We're going to start this business, right? That's kind of how most people start, including myself. That's how I started several businesses that way. Um, and so I think that now being older and wiser and having done it a bunch of times, I would front load a lot more thoughtful work and questions before that like total leap with that partner or alone. There's really important things you need to. So first, let's talk about partners in general. My advice there would mirror Naval Ravikant. I've been, and I know you guys are big fans of his. So he advises or recommends getting a partner, someone who's strong to your weaknesses, and vice versa. And I think that that's the right advice for early founders. I think that my take on that is finding a good partner is smart. Going it alone is really hard, and it's a really lonely road. It takes a really special person to be able to weather those highs and lows, the loneliness that comes with it, being a solo founder, not being able to sort of lean on each other through the tough times, and just kind of vibe off of each other through the whole thing. So I would recommend getting a partner. I would also recommend against getting more than one partner, because once you get to 3 or 4, you know, once you add more than 2 people to the equation, things get really complicated really quickly. All of a sudden, it's a triangle of needs, wants, financial situations, ideas about the business, and it exponentially multiplies against each other of people and progress slowing you down, because you now have too many minds and too many opinions and too many things going on. So I would say be wary of adding more than 2 people to the equation. Be wary of doing it by yourself. I would think that doing it by yourself later in your career makes more sense, but in the beginning, it doesn't seem like the right approach. And then once you have that squared away, you know, sitting down with that person and going through things really in detail, things like, what is our goal with this business? Like, what is important to both of us? Why are we doing this? Like, what is actually driving us here? What's driving you? What's driving me? Do we just want to make a lot of money? Like, do we want to do this forever? Do we want to sell it for millions of dollars? Sorry, my wife just got home. So you have to dig deep on lots of these questions. What's the mission of the business? What are the core values of the business? These are all things that I ignored. You know, I did not core values never came out of my mouth when we were starting our first businesses. I didn't think that it was important. I thought it was like a lot of corporate mumbo jumbo and like not important. Like, let's just get to work, right? Like, this is all nonsense. Like, let's just go make this thing and start selling this thing. But later on, and having gone through so many cycles and ups and downs, it's like these things are super important. Who are your competition? What makes you unique? And getting into, okay, in our first year of operations, what is our goal? Like, what can we pick one number to define our goal? Is that possible? Do we need more than one number? Is it sales? Is it customers? What is it? Is it launching the product? And then how do we map? Then you'll map all of your actions towards that North Star goal that you guys have achieved, and set that into a quarterly, next 90 days, things like that. These are all things you got to get into, and you really need to dig deep on it. And you need to talk about them in advance. Also, there's another just point I recently came across in a podcast that I listen to a lot called Startup Therapy. They have a great episode called Why Co-Founders Often Don't Last. Towards the end of that episode, they talk about like vesting your shares in the business as opposed to just getting them on day one. So thinking through what happens if one of us just decides to quit in a year. Do you still get half the business while I do the rest of the work? No one wants to talk about that when you're starting and really, really excited, right? Those are really difficult things to think through. No one wants to talk about that. Let's talk about making money. Let's talk about growing. So I would recommend that episode and that mindset of like vesting founder shares. There's things like that you can think through earlier, so that even though they're tough conversations in the beginning, you're not having to then have an even tougher discussion a year or two down the road when so-and-so, wants to keep all of his shares but do nothing, and you're doing all the work. So what happens then? So there's things like that I've learned that would have been really, really helpful for me in certain situations and businesses that I never did. That I would, hope some of your members look into and take to heart as they're thinking about going into it a bit slower than most people normally would in their first businesses. Would be my advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's also one thing you said earlier was when you started your first business, you kind of just jumped into it because there was nothing that much to lose. And I think that's something really important, because it's like when you're a kid, you're not financially independent. If you fail, then whatever, it's fine. So it's kind of like when you're thinking about starting a business, you don't really need to think too much about, well, is this really viable, and I really want to make money. Because then if you just jump in and start making a business and then fail, and then you fail a couple times, and you kind of learn all of those things through the process without having some of the real financial consequences that might arise if you're an adult and you're really trying to support yourself. And then when you're a kid and you're trying to start a business, then I think that's just a really good opportunity to try jumping into something like starting a business, because you start to gain a lot of skills and knowledge through that, and just having the experience of trying to create something without, and then if you were maybe a few years out wanting to really, you kind of hit an idea that you think could really be viable, then you've had those past experiences that you can pull from, but not really the consequences of like just trying to make a business and then failing. But
Exactly. Yeah, I agree. Well put.
What is a belief or point of view you hold that is not shared by most other people?
I'm just going to close my door real quick, and because I don't want it to be loud. Hold on.
Yeah, no problem.
So this is an interesting question. I think it's a good one to ask people. The I think that most people, and so I'm going to say this is a majority opinion still, even though there's progress being made against it, but that most people, just dream of getting rich and think that that's going to solve most of their problems. Winning the lottery, saving a bunch of money, becoming a millionaire, exiting your startup is sort of the path to everything being better. I do think that more recently there are finally, not finally, but starting to be more honest conversations around that topic. People like Naval, people like Justin Kahn, who started Twitch. He's very loves talking about this topic. The guys in the Startup Therapy podcast I mentioned earlier talk about this topic, and I think that my opinion is that it's far more important to focus on getting safe, so to speak, financially, rather than getting rich. And that safety, as far as being able to pay your bills, have an emergency fund, however many years make you feel safe, 1, 2, 3 years of expenses, 6 months, whatever you think you need. Getting on base there is super important, very important. If you're not there or feel safe, then you must get there as a number one priority. But after you do get there, I think it's actually more important to recalibrate a little bit of that North Star from just getting rich and having millions of dollars to then solve all of your problems, to finding your equilibrium, zone of mastery, whatever you want to call it, where you are truly engaged and people call it your passion, people call it all sorts of things, but where you are doing what Naval says again, what looks like work to others but doesn't feel like work to you. And that's really hard to find. It's not an easy quest or path. It may take 10 different jobs. It may take 4 different businesses. It may take years of trial and error to get there. But it's about, like, are you making decisions based on that and getting there and getting closer to that? Or are you making decisions on getting more money so that more money can solve your problems and make you happy? I think that that's a much more important way to go. And it involves another, you can, maybe this is a popular belief, maybe it's not, but I think don't quit, never give up, stick through to the end, these types of mantras. I think that quitting is actually, knowing when to quit. I think it's actually really important. And I think quitting is an important skill to hone in on, of like knowing when to continue and knowing when to stop. Quitting isn't always bad, and quitting too soon is a mistake a lot of times. Quitting too late is a mistake a lot of times. Knowing that sweet spot, but using quitting as a tool to continue to pursue that equilibrium and that zone of mastery, more so than is this going to make me rich or not. If I could have done things over and made decisions differently, I think I would have taken my own advice. Previously, I think a lot of my decisions were like, is this path going to, make me money, make me rich? I want to make a lot of money so that then I can be happy and feel safe. But I would have liked to have made some decisions over, I think, as far as like, is this getting me closer to what I really enjoy doing and what's giving me energy and not sucking my energy, and going down that path. So hopefully that's a good answer to your question. And I don't know if any others have touched on it, but I think it's a really compelling topic, and I think most people are generally pretty obsessed about these types of things in their lives and what they should be doing and feeling engaged and passionate. And and making money, and there's just so much, it's just so complex. So for me, those are things that I've just learned and been picking up on, having been through a lot of the ups and downs and having seen some of the other side of like what happens when you do make a bunch of money in a short period of time, and like what it is like. And so I've been able to see things from the other side too, rather than when I just started.
Yeah. There have been studies on like when people win the lottery and whether or not it really makes them happier, and oftentimes it makes them less happy because they thought that making a bunch of money would just have make all their problems go away, and then everything would be so amazing and they'd be all happy. And then it's like, and then they get a bunch of money and they realize, it didn't really change all that much. It just, now you have a lot of money. And so I definitely agree with that. I also agree with knowing when to quit, because if you keep, you were saying earlier, and you could devote all your time and energy towards a terrible idea your entire life, but that's not really gonna get you anywhere. And quitting as a skill, I've never really thought as it as a skill, but I think being able to quit and knowing when to quit is really important. Um so the last question we have, and if you want, we can start looking, you can start talking about some other things, or we can wrap it up, is how can people get a hold of you if they are interested in what you do and some of the products that you are creating?
Probably just the best way. I'm not really like a big social media person or have anything to sell on this recording. So probably just look me up on LinkedIn, by name, and message me there, and just mention this is where you came across me, and happy to get in touch.
Awesome. Okay, well, so with that, we can wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining, Brandon. And yeah, so
All right, great. Thanks for the time and questions as well. Hopefully they helped you and your viewers.
okay,
Okay,
bye.
bye bye.